and today I want to talk about profiles and love. So I'm going to give you a lot of data, so if you are a person who loves data, be sure before you watch the rest of this video that you've got a good pen and some paper handy, because I want you to take notes so that you can follow along. Let's talk about profiles. When you look at your human design chart, you'll see on your chart there's a number on there that kind of looks like a fraction. It has two parts, the first number and the second number, and it's kind of a slash mark in between. Both of those numbers, when we're looking at this in the context of relationships, tell you a lot about your relationship needs, or in converse, what your partner needs in relationships. I think a lot of times when we talk about relationships and profiles in human design, we tend to focus more on the dark side of the profile lines. I want to talk a little bit more in the context of using this information to really learn to love and accept your partner more deeply and more for who they really are. The first thing that I want to tell you, write this down, is that any of you who have a profile with a line 1, 2, and 3 in it, those lower numbers, 1, 2, and 3, are what we call intrapersonal lines. That means that part of your relationship energy, part of what you need to feel bonded in a relationship, is you need to have time on your own inner plane to make sure that you like the way you feel in relationships. And a lot of how you see yourself in your partnership is going to be self-referenced. And that's not bad, by the way, because you deserve to be in a relationship that feels good to you. So you will explore relationships through your own inner terrain and your own inner process, which means that any of you that have a 1, 2, or a 3, if you have any of those numbers in your profile, that means there is a part of you that needs to integrate, to really be still with the energy of your relationship, to make sure that you're jumping into a partnership that feels good and aligned for you. The lines 4, 5, and 6 are what are called transpersonal lines, and these are energies that mean that we learn about ourselves and the other themes in our charts through relationships. And so relationships, for all of you who have those lines, those kinds of relationships are vital for you to live out and learn and grow in the themes of your partnerships, or learn about yourself through partnerships or in relationship. It also means that aspects of your life purpose are going to be lived out in relationships. When we look at partnerships, we are oftentimes looking at a theme of harmony and resonance. That means that when you look at a relationship composite and you look at the profiles, it's always a nice sign in the context of attraction. It's always a nice sign if you have a line in your profile that's similar to your partner. So if you are a 4-1 and your partner is a 1-3, that means you both have that first line as part of your energy, or a 5-1. That first line in common means that there's a way that you approach life and learning that's similar. The first line is investigative. It wants to go deep into knowledge. And in a partnership, when you have lines that are in common, it feels good. It feels aligned. It creates attraction, and it gives you a common place to explore themes in your relationship. That's the first thing. The second thing we want to look for is there a relationship between the lines 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 5, and 6? So write this down. There is a relationship between the line 1 in a profile and the line 4. They work together similarly, and they are harmonious in the way in which they work together. So line 1 and line 4 work together well. Line 2 and line 5, when we're looking at partnership connections, work together well, and line 3 and line 6 work together well. So those are also just information that helps you understand where sometimes there's alignment and even attraction. Line 1s and line 4s are attracted to each other because they both like to go deep in different ways. Line 2 and line 5 are attracted to each other because they both have similar themes that are played out differently. And line 3 and line 6, again, also go together well because they vibe together well. They have similar themes in the way in which they approach relationship and even life. Now, what I want to do now is just break down very briefly the needs of the lines in the profiles. The first line, which is sometimes called the investigator, If you are a first line in your relationship, you need to investigate over time how you feel in your relationship. You want to learn everything you can about your partner and about how you feel in the relationship. And that's a vital need for you. It also means that for you to move forward in your relationship, you got to have enough information to make a good decision about your relationship. One of the things that you're going to find out is that as I go through these, there are very few lines that are really designed to fall in love at first sight and run away and get married. In fact, when we look at where the energy for long-term partnership and relationships happen, sex and sexuality, those are emotional energies that need time for clarity. So it's really important when you think about this that sex and sexuality and longer-term relationships literally have life and death consequences. You can create life, right? Or you could potentially die. Let's say you date the wrong person and they're married and the husband comes after you, right? So you want to make sure that before you go into deeper committed aspects of relationships, or even before you jump in, that you've given yourself enough time to really work through all the details in the partnership, and you've checked in, if you're a first line, with, hey, how do I feel in this relationship? Do I like who I am and where I am being lifted up or not in this partnership? The second line has a relationship energy that we call shyness. And it's not so much shyness as it is that people who carry second line energy need alone time for integration. And there's always a challenge with second line energy about knowing when there is enough alone time. In a perfect world, anybody that carries that 2 energy in your profile, you would be alone in the wilderness, 10 acres or 10 miles in, and never speak to humans. There's a certain introverted quality to the second line energy. But what happens is that energy is also kind of like a vortex. And when you have that second line energy and you disappear, you get called out. People come find you at a certain point, and there's sort of an inner sense of timing, or a cosmic timing, that lets the people who love you know that you've had enough alone time now, let's go out. In relationships, the second line energy likes to be alone with their partner. The perfect date for second line energy would be, let's get together, sit on opposite ends of the couch, or even snuggle up, and let's each read a different book. That need for aloneness is important to maintain and sustain energetic alignment. And so if you have a partner that has a 2 in it, that's a partner that needs time to really center themselves within themselves. The third line, which sometimes can be a more challenging line in partnerships, just simply because we don't understand it. The third line is experiential. When you have third line energy, you learn from doing. When you have third line energy in relationships, there's a tendency with that third line, because of the curiosity that comes from the third line energy, that oftentimes creates the vibe of falling in love at first sight. And because the third line is so experiential, it's very common for third line energies to go all in very fast. Fall in love at first sight. Hey, I dated a guy like this once. On the second date, he asked me to marry him. I should have paid attention, because I realized that he had been married 4 other times already. But this third line energy in its shadow side jumps in too fast, jumps in over their head, and 3 weeks later, they're trying to back out as fast as they can. That's the shadow side of the third line. The truth about the third line is this: if you carry third line energy, you need a couple of things. Number one, you need space in your relationship, because it's in the space of the absence of your partner that you can feel how you are in and out of the relationship. And that actually helps you be in the right relationships better. So truly the story, absence makes the heart grow fonder, that works really well for the third line. And they need that space. And if you are a third line profile, or you're in love with someone who is a third line, they need time. They need to feel themselves over time in the partnership before they commit. So don't push the third line to commit. You really want to let them know for themselves with their own inner clicking whether they are in or out. And don't get hurt if there's a little bit of fantasy sometimes that gets involved in the third line dynamic. They're not fantasizing about someone else because they're thinking about leaving you. They're checking out how do they feel in your absence about other people, because they want to know, can they really be in, all in? The fourth line has a bonding strategy that we call friendships or brotherhood, sisterhood. When you have fourth line energy, you need to have a strong foundation of friendship in your relationship for the relationship to really work. It also means for the fourth line that to leave a relationship, you oftentimes have to have something else kind of waiting in the wings. That's not cheating. That's not being bad as a partner. That just means when it's time to go, because the friendship is so important, you have to have enough impetus to leave. And when you leave as a fourth line, you want to leave and be friends still. So taking care of the friendship component of the relationship and making sure that that's strong is very important for the fourth line. The fifth line has a little bit of a bigger challenge, and in the time that I have, I'll try to unpack it as best as I can. The fifth line lives in what's called a projection field, which means if you are a fifth line and you go out in the world, people will project onto you what they need from you based on what is perhaps injured or traumatized within them. You bring a lot of healing energy when you're a fifth line. And when you go out into the world, people don't always see you for who you are. They see through you what they need and want in their partnerships to fill the holes in their own hearts. That means that sometimes people project expectations onto you that can be really hurtful and even confusing. But you, as part of your life purpose, you're here to heal the world. And so you will heal the world by giving yourself permission to set good boundaries and only put yourself in relationships that are really a good reflection of who you are. Making sure that when you have fifth line energy, that the expectations that are being put upon you are expectations that are good and healthy and that you can fulfill, you can joyfully fulfill. If you're in a relationship and there's a lot of fantasy and a lot of expectations that you can't fulfill, it's not the right relationship. The other part of that is, seduction, and people get upset with this word. So I'm not saying seduction in a sleazy way, but seduction and being able to compel people to be in relationship with you simply with your charm is part of that fifth line piece. And it's actually what makes fifth line energy so fun and so juicy to be in partnership with when they are good and healthy relationships. Last but not least are sixth line energies. Sixth lines go through three distinctly different phases in their relationships and in their energy. The first phase goes to about the age of 30. And in that first phase, when you're a sixth line profile, you feel like a third line. You're trying everything, and sometimes it's really not working. You're in the wrong relationships, the ones that aren't necessarily fulfilling you, because you're learning through what doesn't work how to make a better plan for what does work. As a sixth line, you go through a second phase from about 30 to about 50, and that's a cycle that we call being on the roof. And what happens a lot of times when you're in that cycle is your relationship fire, your passion, it kind of goes down to the pilot light. It doesn't mean you're not in partnerships. It doesn't mean you're not in relationships. Some of you may already be married in that, but the juice, the passion, the energy that you have available for relationships isn't always there, especially when you get more towards 40 to 48. But the sixth line has a deep longing for a soulmate. Really, this whole idea of twin flame, soulmate thing, that's a sixth line thing. And what happens a lot of times is that soulmate energy doesn't usually or very often get triggered until that sixth line goes through the final third phase, which happens around the age of 50 when we go through a cycle called coming off the roof. So six lines come off the roof at 50. And in that cycle, in that last cycle where they're serving as a role model, they really have the ability to attract into their lives soulmate quality partnerships, or if they're already in a partnership, they deepen with great love and great heart expansion the quality of their partnership, and it really allows them to deepen that relationship into a soulmate quality relationship. Also, by the way, just real quick, if you're a sixth line, sometimes those soulmate relationships show up in your friendships and not necessarily in your marriage, and that doesn't mean your marriage isn't fabulous. It just means that juicy soulmate connection comes somewhere else.